All right. Hi, everybody. Michelle here, and welcome to Monday Momentum with Michelle. And I am so excited for today's conversation. So, this is something new I'm doing called Momentum Conversations, and where we're having conversations about how to position ourselves for kingdom momentum in various areas. And so, today it's all about the money. And I know that's important. And I know that's what you guys love. And so, we're going to be talking about that. And so, today I don't know if I want to call him a guest, a brother, family, but I have someone here, Brandon Galici, and we've known each other for at least, I'm going to say 4 years, maybe five. And we met through Kingdom Driven Entrepreneurs. So for all of you KDE people out there, woo woo. And we met and we have been, oh gosh, we've probably led cohorts together. We've done enrollment events together. There's other things we've done. And so I'm just so excited to have him here. So welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Michelle. And we were talking before this, and we were trying to figure out, well, how long have we known each other? And
Yeah.
I think we've come up with four, maybe even a little more. And but I was thinking back, I was like, wow, like I
Yeah.
I didn't realize it's been over 4 years. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. And I'm gonna do research. I'll let you know. I'll send you a text. And so Brandon is a CFP, which I believe stands for Certified Financial Planner, and he's gonna tell us all about it. And he's from California, where I actually have never been. I know you weren't born and raised there, but I've never been to California, and everyone tells me that I'll love it. So maybe one day I'll be able to visit you guys up there and get to experience an earthquake even maybe. So yeah, I'm like that sometimes. So anyway, okay. Brandon, so tell me, what exactly is a financial planner?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question. I'll try to keep it succinct because you could ask that question to 10 financial planners and potentially get 10 different answers. So I really like to boil it down quite simply. A financial planner should be answering your financial questions through your lens of values. So what I mean by that is it's not just about the numbers. That's really important. And of course, a financial planner should be good with the numbers, but you should also be having meaningful conversations with them so they can understand what is truly important to you. Where has God led you in your life? What calling do you have on your business, in your finances, and then answering those questions through your lens and not mine. Like I have my own biases. We all have our own biases, but I try to set those aside when I'm having conversations with people because my biases aren't as important. If I can know as much as I can about the person that's sitting in front of me, and also understand the numbers in their financial situation, then we can have a really, really meaningful conversation and ultimately help them spend their money in a way that aligns with their values and enjoy and live a fulfilled life today, while also knowing that they've got a plan for their future too. So that'll be we'll call it my short answer.
Sure answer. Actually, there's something you said, help them spend their money in a way that really works for like your goals or your lifestyle or even your calling. And so I think that's so important because sometimes we put like a bad name or bad taste on spending money, but
Mhm.
we know that's essential for everything that we do. So what are some of the obstacles you think that people have, especially entrepreneurs have, when it comes to spending money, whether it's their life or their business?
Yeah, well, Michelle, I think you touched on a really important point. It's in society, spending has this negative connotation. You've got a spender and a saver in a relationship. The saver is good, spender is bad. That's essentially the context that most people have. So I think societal pressures is a lot of it. One of my favorite questions, and I'd encourage your audience to ask themselves this too: what was money like growing up? Because depending on our past and experiences with our money, that is ultimately very much going to shape how we view it today. That's how you can have millionaires who don't spend any money because they're still saving when it's like mathematically they're not going to run out of money, but because growing up maybe things were tight, it's totally shifted. So I think that's part of it. So give yourself grace on that, depending on how you felt about money and your perspectives. But then really figure out like what's the purpose of this money? Because spending isn't bad. It's only an issue if you're spending money or if you're overspending. So if you're constantly taking on credit card debt, okay, that's not going to be a good thing. But then from there, why are you spending the money the way that you do? I'll use a car as an example. Say that you aren't really a car person and you just need something that's reliable, but to get you to point A to point B. Well, it probably is not going to make sense for you to go out and buy a Ferrari. Now, I'm not saying going out and buying a Ferrari is bad, but if you're just like, hey, I just need a car, like I would ask, hey, why am I buying this Ferrari? Because there might be something there that's again not really aligned with your values. Or you're a huge car person and say that you've got the money to spend. Maybe a Ferrari does make sense for you, right? So it all comes down to your personal values. And again, just don't spend your discretionary money on things that you don't enjoy. If you don't like coffee, don't spend money on coffee every single day. If you love coffee, I'm a bit of a coffee connoisseur myself. I love it. I don't spend on it every day, but I'm okay with going to coffee shops sometimes and meeting my friends there too. So it's just all about how do you spend your money in a way that aligns with your values and not society's.
Right. And I think it's so important because your message, I've heard it, a lot of your messages, and it really talks about taking off the stigma or the negativity that comes with spending. And,
Mhm.
and that's so important, especially as entrepreneurs, because we have to know how to steward or spend well in order for us to be successful, especially in the long run, right? And another thing that I don't know if people know, but you're also an entrepreneur. And how long have you been an entrepreneur, you would say?
Yeah, so I officially broke away from a large financial services company. I was at the time I was technically W-2 and still responsible for finding my own clients, but I didn't have as much of the expense responsibility. So I was like a pseudo entrepreneur, if you will, then, but officially launched Galici Financial in February of 2021. So at the time of this, almost 3 years of full independence where I'm responsible for, for more of the entrepreneurial duties too.
Okay, awesome. And so one of the things we talk about here in Momentum is this process that we walk through as believers as we position ourselves for God to move in our business. And one of the first phases I found is like the call. Like we all have a call story. So Brandon, do you have a call story? And if you do, what was your call into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I'll take it back to I was probably wrapping up college, and at this point I was pretty confident that I was going to get into the financial services industry. So I had listened to a bunch of podcasts, and a lot of it was people going from a big firm to starting their own thing, being more entrepreneurial. So kind of then, and this was before I was a Christian at the time, but I wasn't really walking with the Lord. It was still more my parents' thing, if that makes any sense. So I felt like I'm probably going to do something later on in the independent space, become an entrepreneur. And then I got involved in Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur, of course, and I was still at the large financial services firm at the time. And then fast forward a couple of years later, my wife and I were getting ready to get married in 2020, and I started to feel more led to pursue what else was out there and look at leaving that large financial services firm. So the very first person that I got connected to was from a quote unquote random Facebook advertisement. Like no one in the financial services industry has this wonky story about finding a firm through a Facebook ad, but I got connected and I was like, oh, this could be awesome. And then very wisely, my then fiance, now wife, suggested, hey, maybe you should do a little bit more due diligence than just starting with this firm that you've found on Facebook advertisement. So did my due diligence. I was even looking at partnering with a Christian financial planner out here, and it was looking great. And then God kind of closed the door on that side, and then ultimately it made sense to partner with this other back office. So I could launch and become independent. And then a couple months after I did that, my wife and I moved to California. So it was kind of this really long process. It wasn't a God said become an entrepreneur, and in 2 weeks I was an entrepreneur. It was a little bit longer, and as I look back on it, you can kind of see those individual steps that he had me take.
Right. I think that's true for everybody. Like when it's happening, a lot of times we don't recognize it, but we all have like I call it this burning bush moment where it wasn't as extensive as the burning bush, but it's like there was just this calling that happened, and it was even a process looking back for Moses to even get to where he needed to get once he got the call, so to speak. So yeah, definitely connect with that. So here's the other thing I want to ask you about entrepreneurship, and then we'll get to the money because I know that's what people want to hear. You've been an entrepreneur, you said about 3 years. So what are like some key takeaways that you would say have really impacted you during this journey? Maybe one or two.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I guess one, realizing that it's going to be a challenge, and it's not what social media always makes it out to be. You see entrepreneur in the bio, and it's like, oh, they've got all this stuff and they're crushing it day one, and it's like, if you peel back the onion a little bit, might not be exactly the case.
Yeah.
And two, there's so many things that you just don't know what you don't know.
Hmm.
Right. I mean, maybe you came from a similar industry, a W-2 job into entrepreneurship, like myself, or maybe it's a totally unrelated industry, but there are just so many almost seemingly small things that can sometimes add up. So I feel like even the time management perspective, you just have to be a little bit more organized, not just with the time, but all of the other things, because if you start missing IRS tax payments, or if you don't make sure that your licenses are up to date because maybe your previous company made sure all of those things were in place, then you might fall behind a bit. So I think just again, I'd say actually my second part would be find a community too,
Yeah.
because that's I think one of probably the fastest ways to figure out what you don't know
Right.
already.
Right.
You have trusted people, you can ask them questions. Hey, how did you make your tax payment? Or how did you make sure that your license stayed up to date? And maybe they've got some sort of super practical tip for you. And again, entrepreneurship doesn't have to be an island. I think sometimes we almost make it that way. We say, not necessarily you and I, but people say entrepreneurship is lonely. It's like,
Right.
what's only lonely if you kind of choose for it to be
Right.
lonely? There's plenty of communities. Obviously, Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur is one incredible one that you're not alone at all.
Right. Right. And what's so important when you're saying you can ask questions, I found that when you're around a community of like-minded people, they'll ask you questions that you never even thought about. So like, for example, yeah, I'm working on my, like you say, the IRS, I'm working on my taxes, or, I'm working on my 1099s for my staff or whatever. And it's like, what? Is that a thing? And so just being, I found in the community, it's like, as you can ask questions, just being in their presence, a lot of times you gain knowledge, wisdom, understanding that you never would have gotten on your own. So I'm really big on community when it comes to that. So now let's get to the money per se.
Right.
I know for me, hmm, I feel like every year I'm learning a financial lesson about business. Whether it's, bringing on staff and how you, with the payments of the staff and the taxes that come with that. Even like, I remember my first 2 years of business, me having to pay taxes was very stressful because I was not prepared. I didn't know. I waited till the last minute. And that's where I spent a lot of time, real talk, begging the Lord, help me, Father, because I just don't want to have to pay anything that I don't have to pay, like help me to do this. And then I grew and grew, right? And so, but when it comes to finances, let me ask you this. What does the kingdom of God have to do with our finances?
Oh, well, loaded question there too, but it has a lot. I mean, depending on what source you look at, over 2,400 or so verses in the Bible are talking about money. And I think from the study that I've done, the reason that God's talked to us so much about money is because He knows that that could potentially be the number one competition with our heart versus Him. Because what I've noticed is people who are super stressed about money, it's that trickles down into other areas of their life, their health, wellness, relationships, career, decision making. It just flows down into so many other aspects of our life. Or if we're being money led and we're just all about the grind and we're so focused on money, well, then also those things that I just talked about could also kind of slip through the cracks. And I think there's not many things that you could or that have competition with God besides money, because you could almost attribute like, oh, it's about cars and success.
Mhm.
Well, what do cars and success have? There's a bill attached to that. There's money attached to that. So that almost everything is going to touch our money in some way or another. And obviously God more than knew that, right? So I think He gave us a ton of warnings about it, as well as also some really great principles as far as how can we steward it and also look at our money differently than even the world does.
Right. And I think for like when you're talking about the competition, even like if you're a new entrepreneur and you're trying to develop your business to where it makes a profit, that can easily slip in and become your main thing. That can be the thing that you easily like, I'm gonna seek that first. Like, God, I know you're here and I appreciate you and I love you, but this money thing, I need money. I need to make money for my business to go. I need money to pay the bills. I need money for whatever. And then it's like slowly, you begin to shift where that becomes like your main focus. And I think as believers, as kingdom minded entrepreneurs, that is part of our challenge sometimes. That's a part of what needs to be our intention, that regardless of what our bank account looks like, and I've gone through the 15 cents and praying that nothing hits it before something else comes in, kind of thing. And I've gone through the mini zeros where it's like, oh, I'm just living the life. Like I've gone through those different seasons, and but through each season, we still have to keep like God is the first. Kingdom of God is first. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. And so I just know that can be a challenge. So when you're talking about that, can easily become your main focus or your God, really. We have to be so mindful of that. So that's a really good point. And when we talk about momentum, and I'm working on like coming up with a one-liner. I have like a couple of liners, but my one-liner today, I think is going to be Kingdom Momentum, advancing your business, um, advancing your business through the power of the kingdom of God. I'm just going to say that, but that's going to change. I'm letting y'all know right now, it's probably going to change a little bit as I'm refining it. But how do you, since you're a financial planner, how can an entrepreneur position themselves for momentum as a kingdom-minded entrepreneur with their finances?
Yeah. Yeah, so you gave me that question ahead of time, so I was able to prepare a few things. I've got 5 of them. I can kind of share them high level, and then if you want to ask me deeper
Okay.
questions for each of them. So the 5 that I've got: separate your business and personal expenses. This is super practical. A lot of times, I mean, you even mentioned it, Michelle. Tax time for entrepreneurs isn't always the most fun time, but if we're organized, it's not actually that bad. So that's one that's, I
Right.
call that super low hanging fruit. Getting organized kind of along the same lines, having some sort of accounting system in place.
Okay.
Now I'm what I call product agnostic. I don't need you to do a specific type of accounting system, whether it's I use something called Wave Apps. It's like QuickBooks, but it's free and it works for me. But there's QuickBooks, of course. If you are a big Excel junkie, that works. There's probably other apps and softwares out there. The key is it needs to work for you. And if you're if you're hiring a bookkeeper, and it
Right.
works for them too. So getting organized system that's personalized to you. Knowing your costs, that kind of is the next step of that. After you get organized, understanding your costs, that's going to help solve a lot of things in your business too, and will even help. I know through Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur, we talk a lot about pricing, and not many people have a terribly defined process to even determine how to price. So knowing your costs is one of the first steps to then get better with pricing, because if we get better with pricing, then we could potentially increase profits as well, and then continue to steward that. Number 4, I think this is a pretty fun one, pretty practical too, developing a profit system. So there's ways that we can automate our business finances, where instead of money's coming in and we constantly are trying to figure out what should go to taxes, what should go to giving, what should go towards my operating expenses, what should go down towards debt. So I think there's some simple does not mean easy, but simple ways to think about a profit system that we can dive into a little bit today too, if you want. And then number 5, this is incredibly important: dreaming with God to set our financial targets. Because I could say, hey, I want to make $1 million, have a 6-figure, 7-figure business, however many figures. It's like, why? Was that you? Is God leading you to that? What's the deeper why? Because the goal of our business is, yes, one of the goals is to generate a profit, and money is not bad and profits are not bad. In fact, profits are good and we need those for our business. But again, like we talked about, if profits take the place above God, that's when we get an issue. Or if our business practices aren't aligned with kingdom, and we're manipulating or taking advantage of customers so that we can increase profits, that's the underlying issue there. So dreaming with God, obviously an incredibly important piece to, especially the kingdom momentum portion.
Right. So there's 3 that stand out to me right now. To even hit the first one, I probably would say once again, my probably first 2 years, I was not great at separating my business and personal. I mean, I did set up a business account. I had a card that was allocated, a couple of them allocated to business, but I had not really mastered that practice of, you know, when I'm at Target and, I have one card that has certain about another card with another, I may end up pulling something where I know, and that has a lot to do with stewarding. So I know that's something that's really important, but it's about mastering, I think, the practice of that, and the getting the organized is important. But counting your cost or knowing your costs, I think that's what you said, knowing your costs. I want to
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit more about that. So like, what are some, I would say, practical ways to know your costs? Because they seem to change as you grow and develop. But what are some practical ways you think a business owner could know their costs?
Yeah, so it starts with that accounting system in place. So if you have that accounting system, typically almost any of those solutions is going to allow you to track things. So you can link your business card, you can link your business account. So now that you know where things are, everything is nice and organized, and maybe you check that once per month just to make sure things are accurate, allocate them appropriately because you're right, things are going to change. And I think that's typically, even when we're thinking about a budget, or in this case tracking our expenses, people are like, well, it changes so much, why even do it?
Mm,
And it's like, yes, it is going to change, but I think one really practical way to think about it to start is figuring out your, what I call your fixed expenses. Those are things that are coming on a monthly basis, quarterly, maybe you pay annually. Those could be things like your software, any types of licensing. If you have employees, that would be your payroll that's coming in on a consistent basis. And typically, it's a little bit easier to kind of nail down these because yes, these are going to change, maybe fluctuate a bit over time. But for the most part, if you pay $100 a month for your CRM,
mhm,
your customer relationship management system, it's probably going to change at most one time per year. So you got $100 a month for your CRM all year long. Okay, that's one thing. Hey, you know that your licensing is $300 and it's due every single February.
mhm.
Okay, well we can write that down because I think once we start to get these easier costs down, now we almost know what the minimum that we would need to generate from our business is. Hey, what keeps the lights on?
Yeah,
Here's our minimum number. And
yeah,
then we can start figuring out above and beyond that, is there any type of overspending in our business in other things? Are we charging enough? Because
right,
maybe you go through this process and realize, even if you're a service-based business, hey, it took me 10 hours to do this and
right.
I charged $100. Oh man, like that, we should probably rethink that because, we're probably not working for $10 an hour on a long-term basis. That's not going to be the key to success. So even once we have that organized and once we list out these fixed expenses and we check it and monitor it, now we can start seeing more trends arise.
Yeah, it reminds me of like one of my very first business services. I on the educational side, I do workshops, and at that time I was doing a lot of local workshops. And I remember when I would get my first, I don't know, I think I got, it wasn't my first call, but like my very first 5 calls, and I was so excited. I had not figured out my costs. I had not figured out any of those things. I was just excited to get a call. And then I remember they were saying, well, how much do you charge? And I had not figured that out yet. I almost would be embarrassed to say this, but I know there's others of you out there like this. So I just threw out a number that I felt would be great. I'm not going to tell you what it is because that part is embarrassing. But I just threw out a number, and they're like, "Oh, great!" That should have been the first sign because they were quick to say, "Oh, great." But anyway, I had not factored in my travel, meaning gas, both ways. I had not factored in the resources that I had to bring. I had not factored out anything other than this number that looked really good. So by the time I had deducted all of the costs, I'll tell you this, for a 3 hour service, I ended up with $100.
Is that before or after taxes too?
Oh, okay. After taxes, probably 65 if we want to go there. So yeah, thank God I have evolved since then. But I think that's so key. And I love how you said to track it, like I think you said on a regular basis, monthly or something like that, so that
Yeah,
you
go in. Yeah, 'cause it should be linked automatically. But if you just go in there on a monthly basis, don't overwhelm yourself. And I need to go in there every week, but just go in there monthly just to monitor and check it. Because then if something is way higher or way lower for that matter, it's like, oh, let me explore that a little bit further. So it's just good stewardship there.
and let me just say what else. Let me tell you what else. I did not have an accounting system. I want to make sure I'm using the terms right. I was using paper pencil. So it was not automated, and the review was not automated. It's not was not consistent either. So that really blocked my momentum because it shifted my focus, frankly, and it put me in places to where things, I had to move money around to pay different things and try to make it through. It a lot had to do with, like you said, I was not charging enough because I didn't know my
Mhm.
costs. I couldn't even start with the baseline. So love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I think one thing that's really helpful there too, Michelle, and also for people that are listening to this is give yourself grace on that,
yeah,
right? Because like I also don't want like trying to come up with the quote unquote perfect price right off the bat to be the stumbling block, because especially for your first couple deals, your first couple clients,
Mhm.
again, we do not know what we don't know.
Right.
Right. So even if you only make $65 after tax on your, for 3 hours for your first client or your first couple
Yeah,
clients, it's
yeah,
like I'm guessing you probably increase your price from there.
yes,
But if you were, but you still took action, right? You still served those people. And then you got that information by taking faith-filled action
right,
to then make that change of like, oh, I should probably dive into my costs and increase my price, right? So
right,
if we sit on the sidelines on the front end, all right, God, give me this perfect price right out of the get-go and give me
right,
all this knowledge, and then we don't take action, well,
yeah,
then we're not going to make any money. We're going to have a higher profit margin, but we're going to have $0 in revenue. So it doesn't matter what our profit margin is if we don't get revenue. So I'd encourage you to come up with, like, have an idea of what your costs are.
mhm,
You're going to have to make some assumptions at the beginning, take that step. And even if you don't end up making as much money, think of it as you still technically got paid to learn this,
yep,
right? Like you didn't lose money on this deal. You didn't make a lot, but you
yeah,
didn't lose money. And essentially, I think of this as you got paid to learn,
that's right. It was my learning
right?
lesson for real. And I actually I don't think I even regret it. It was necessary. I had to feel the ouch of it for me to be like,
Mhm.
wait a minute. Let me take a
Yeah.
look and see what's really happening. So yeah, so that's definitely something. And I think also from a kingdom perspective, it takes faith to even increase the price. Because I can
Mhm.
look back, part of it was me not knowing my cost, but part of it was me not having the faith of the value of what I had,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I hope they'll pay this amount. And then realizing I messed my own self up with that. So, but I agree, have grace. I don't regret it. It was something I need to learn. And I'm still learning, even now, I'm still learning. So the other thing you talked about, now the title just caught my attention when you said profit system. Okay. Profit system. So go a little bit more into this profit system idea here.
Yeah. So how I think of a profit system is you're essentially pre-planning where your money is going to go, or your revenue is going to go ahead of time.
Mhm.
So for example, you've got your different, you have some different buckets. So you've got 100% of revenue, doesn't even matter what the dollar amount is. It's
Right.
because it's easy to think in percentages here. So say out of this 100%, we want 10% to go to giving. Okay. So 10% of every dollar that comes in automatically is going to go towards giving. Say 30% is going to go towards taxes. And again, this is just a sample. Talk to your CPA and confirm some of these numbers for you. But the concept is going to be the same regardless of how you change these levers. Say then 40% is going to go towards expenses, your operating expenses, whatever that looks like. You know your costs now, so this is going to be a little bit easier. And then lastly, I think there's 20% left. Maybe that's considered your personal income, and that's what's going to get transferred to your personal account for your your family's expenses.
So essentially, you're saying a profit system is where where you allocate the money or distribute the money. I'm not sure the best word for that, in a way that you can see what like, you can see where your profit is or what it is. Is that what you're saying essentially?
Yeah, and this is also something too. This isn't a set it one time and forget it. This isn't a
Right.
super rigid structure because your tax situation is going to change, your expenses are going to change, but now you at least have a general idea once you start this and start to dial it in a little
Right.
bit more that hey, as you continue to increase your revenue, hey, how is that actually going to affect your personal income? Because again, if you charge $5,000 for a new client, again, regardless of what the business is, $5,000 is not going to your personal income and to your family, right?
Right.
But if ahead of time we already know, because if nothing else, you could break this system down and make it uber simplistic and just figure out your tax portion.
Right.
If you just did this system and allocated 20 to 30%, or again, whatever that number is for you on your tax situation, that is going to make your life so much easier every single quarter when you make those estimated tax payments, because now you're not sitting there every quarter. Oh, well, what was my revenue? Okay, well, what should I do here? It's like, no, I already figured this out on the front end. And then now once you figure that out, you can tweak it over time. And
Right.
it just kind of reduces the mental load, reduces the decisions that you have to make because you can feel confident that you made a decision up front, which then frees more time to focus on the business and the people that you're called to serve.
I think that also has a big impact because when I started my business, I didn't when I say I was called to business, I was called to business. It was never part of my plan. It was never part of my life plan. I think even when someone's like, why don't you start your business? I'm like, for what? I have a job, I'm vested, I'm good, right? But then this whole concept of when you said $5,000 is not really 5,000 that goes into your bank account. When you work a job, you forget that the 5,000 they may have given you, they've already taken out Social Security and the tax and the this and the that. So when you get the check, you're like, ooh, I get to use it however I need for my household. When you're a business owner, it's like you're doing all that yourself. And then if you don't know what you don't know, you might get a lot of surprises on the other end. So that was really big for me too. Of even when doing the pricing of like, oh, once again, I'm charging this number that I think's big, forgetting that's not the number that's hitting my bank account, my personal bank account. That's not the number that I get to do groceries and lights and food from. So that's so very key. Yeah, so love that. And then the last thing that you said, which I actually learned, I don't know if you learned it from KDE, but I know I learned it from KDE, is dreaming with God. Dreaming with God. So tell me a little bit more about the dreaming with God.
100% learned that from Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur.
Okay.
So yes, so yeah, so we're in the same boat there. Yeah, so I think this looks a little bit different than even traditional goal setting, right? I mean, I love Shay's book, Kingdom. I know you've read it probably multiple times too, but the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur's Guide to Goal Setting. I think that's an incredible resource that you can go pick up for people who are getting ready to set goals. But again, this is the spirit-led aspect of our business because we know that it's important to set goals to some degree, but are they our goals or and what's I like to ask like, okay, I want to make $100,000. We'll throw out that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, why? Oh, so I can have more money and I can buy this and buy that. All right, that's probably not the why that is kingdom driven entrepreneurs that we should have. Now, is it wrong to want to buy those things? Absolutely not. But if that's our sole reason
Right.
for having a six-figure business, or even if it's a pride thing to just tell people, put that in your bio, six-figure kingdom entrepreneur. That's a conversation for for another day too.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure that we're aligned with God's heart in our calling because that's going to change. Maybe that does impact our pricing structure, whether that could be increasing something or that could be decreasing something. And if we're not tapping into the wisdom of heaven, we lose our, as Dr. Jim Harris calls it, our unfair advantage, which is Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so when I first started to do the dream with God, what I actually learned was he had bigger dreams for me than I had for myself. And he actually was throwing out numbers where it's like, really? For real? That just wasn't, for me on my radar. And then so I'm like, well, okay, Lord, if you're thinking that's good, let's go for it. Let's head that. And I remember the first time I actually made one of those goals, and I put it even when because here's the thing, when you dream with God, one of the questions you can ask, and I think you already said it or mentioned it, like, look, Lord, what is your heart for my business? What is your heart for my business? I would start there. And then, like, there's a dialogue that happens the more intimate you are with God. And so sometimes I'll say, okay, what are my financial goals for this year? And sometimes I say, are you sure? Is that what I heard? That's what I thought I heard. So there's a whole dialogue with me and him that are happening. But I remember there's this big number goal that I almost want to say I didn't have a lot of faith for.
Mm.
And so there's a number that came up, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write the number down. I'm like, ooh, that it looks nice, but I had no idea how I was going to make this goal. I had no idea what was going to happen, but I kept it before my eyes, and I came in agreement with God for it. And I remember when I took the time to count not just the cost, but count like the streams that were coming through, because sometimes in business we can be like going, 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 and if we're not paying attention. But I remember being like, oh my gosh, I'm only 5,000 off the goal, not even knowing that at the time. And so I'm like, okay, so that even increased my faith a little more to be like, okay, yeah, we can do this, we can make this. And so definitely dreaming with God is so very important because I think sometimes, depending on your relationship with God or what you learn about God from other people, you may think that, oh, okay, he's going to have me do something that I might have to, sacrifice this or turn down that. But a lot of times his dreams for us are so much bigger than what we had for ourselves. So that's cool for
Yeah.
me. Oh, did you want to say something else on that?
Well, I was just going to say, and it reminds me of Psalms 37:4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart, where God's not going to typically, at least from my experience and from talking to people, have you do something that is just like you're not passionate about in any degree. Like I use the
Right,
example, and you've probably heard this before, Michelle, but my sister got all the musical talent in my family, and I don't have that. And therefore, I don't have a passion or desire to be a worship leader
right,
anywhere. Right. And so it would, again, now, am I saying that God couldn't do that? No, I'm not. But it's probably pretty unlikely that all of a sudden God is going to lead me to become a worship leader.
right,
Right. Because that's just not what I'm passionate about. But I am passionate about helping people. And I've got this numbers side and analytical, but also this deep heart for helping people beyond just the numbers and but their whole life in general.
mhm,
And that like I've been called to certain kind of niches inside of that space, if you will, like different offerings and whatnot. And that makes more sense. Even from, when I share some of the things that I'm doing with other people in the industry, they're like, no, just focus on the expensive stuff and find the people with the most amount of money. And that's the people like, don't get distracted on these other things. That's
right,
what the world tells me. I'm confident because God's placed this on my heart.
mhm, mhm.
And that's why I have the I've heard it called Godfidence
Yeah,
to take these steps, even if it's not traditional wisdom, if
right,
you will, because it is an alignment, because his desires are now my desires in that space.
right,
It's not
yeah,
out of left field.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so the five, I'm gonna go through it again and you just make sure I know what I'm talking about. So the five ways that we can position ourselves for kingdom momentum in our finances. Number one is to separate your personal and your business money, income, revenue, and spending. Also, number two, get organized with an accounting system. And you would recommend an automated one?
If I typically, yes, I think that's going to save most people time. I mean, theoretically, you could do it via Excel, but I think it is going to just be a lot easier.
Yeah. I have some thoughts, but we can't talk about that today. Okay, next, number three, know your costs would be number three. Number four, get a profit system. And that really talks about having different buckets of how you allocate or distribute your money. Once
Yeah,
you,
and then one really practical tip on that. I've
okay,
personally started using it. There's a bank called Novo, Novo. They help. It's for I don't pay anything to utilize it, so it's free. I mean, of course, if you're doing different check writing, maybe there's some fees there, but just for using it as a normal bank, not minimum balances or anything. And
okay,
what it will do is they call these reserve accounts, so you can automatically allocate any money that comes into this account. So you can connect your Stripe, your PayPal, however you're processing payments will come in, and then you can set up your reserves to automatically 10% giving, 30% taxes, and then now you can even physically see these separated out. So that's what I've done. But you could also do this with whatever business bank account that you have now. It would just be a little bit more manual, but the concept would be the same. But that's just something that I've personally used, and it's working really well for me. So telling other people about it.
all right, thanks for that. And then number five, dreaming with God, right? We can't leave God. If you're a kingdom minded entrepreneur, if you're kingdom driven entrepreneur, you cannot leave God out on the sidelines. He wants to partner with you for your business. That includes your finances, that includes how you spend money, how you make money, how you give money, all of those different things. And so, Brandon, I want to thank you so much for coming on and having this momentum conversation with me. Now, first, tell me two things. Who do you serve and how can people get in contact with you?
Yep. So typically I serve Henry's high earners, not rich yet. So that's anyone 45-ish and younger who has financial questions. And then I also work with several entrepreneurs. I love the entrepreneurial side. I am one myself, and a lot of tax planning opportunities and a lot of other fun stuff too.
Okay. And how can we get in contact with you?
The best way would just be to check out my website, GaliciFinancial.com. I'm really active on Instagram specifically. That's just at Galici Financial. So if you want to connect with me on there, you're more than welcome to. And if someone would want what I'm calling a free financial health checkup, they can go to my site and right on the beginning, click a link and get some personalized advice for free if they want.
Okay, awesome. So we'll definitely leave his information in the description wherever it is. I think we're on Facebook, so it's up there. And so that you can reach out to Brandon and also check him out on Instagram. I think I just liked something today. It was a poll, maybe I don't know if it was today or yesterday. So definitely check him out. He's really active on there. And Really good stuff. So thank you so much for being here. I want to say thank you, everybody. If you have questions also, you can leave it down and I'll send it to Brandon because, I like finances, but it's not my specialty. So, and I'll try to answer them or at least refer you to him. Thank you guys and have a great Monday.